Welcome. I'm John Shield, together with Prasanth, who will speak in a moment. We are the organisers of API Craft Bangalore and also the All About APIs meetup group. I'm based in Singapore. I've been running the API Craft Singapore meetup for a couple of years. I also run the API Days Singapore conference, and together with Prasanth, we've been discussing starting a meetup group in Bangalore. We had our first meetup a couple of months ago when Prasanth presented on DEPA, which is a key part of the Digital India program. And that was quite well received. So tonight we're going to talk about something that is top of mind at the moment, connecting a tech stack for remote working. If you're already a member of the All About APIs meetup group, you may have known that the organizer stepped down. We figured that the topic area APIs is very similar to the API Craft subject area. So we decided to take up that group. So some of the people attending this would have found out about it from the API Craft meetup group, and others will have found out from All About APIs. Perhaps, Prasanth, you'd like to talk and mention a bit about yourself, especially since you're based in Bangalore yourself.
Yes, thanks, John. Hi, everybody. So I am Prasanth. I work for an IT services company based out of Bangalore. I'm very much interested in the API economy, the wonderful world of possibilities which is opened up by the APIs, specifically in the financial sector called as open banking or open finance. So our first event was on the data empowerment and protection architecture. One of the key legislations that is and the changes that is happening in India financial market, which will make the customer the custodian, the owner of their own financial data, and which will open up wonderful possibilities for the customers, the industry, and everybody, all the stakeholders who are part of it. Today, the topic that we chose to conduct the event is on connecting your tech stack. This is one of the topic which is predominantly there in our mind when we work from home, especially in India, as we are reaching that 5th week of remote work, and majority of us professionals are working from home, or trying to access different systems, which earlier used to be manual or which were not connected. So give our point of view on how this working scenario are changing, and what is the role which the central character in our whole discussion, that is the API, plays in this. So on any normal day, while we are attending office, there are essentially two set of activities that we carry out. One is the customer facing and the other is internal facing. So as internal facing, I'll have to talk to my manager, probably I'll have to communicate to my team about their activities that they need to carry out for the day. I need to probably work with I need to work with a set of colleagues on one particular module, developing a module or enhancing a module. Or then I need to ensure that these things are getting done essentially in the timelines that has been agreed upon. I have to keep a track of the time that I spend on it. In a similar way, with customers, interaction with the customers. It may be just to engage them to get a understanding of what is their requirement, their technology landscape, or I'm trying to sell any of the services or a product to them, or else helping them use my service or a product. And of course, if they have already bought into my service or an application, helping them in terms of any changes that they have to make on any issues that they are facing while using my product or the application. So how does it happen? there are a n number of interactions that I just mentioned a couple of handful of them only. But there are n number of roles, n number of industries. So there are n number of interactions, n number of industries, the different methods of working, different style of working. Every industry has its own processes, its own process flow, its own particular set of that moment of truth or the moment of interaction, point of touch points, right? So, and everything be all or everything digital? No, necessary, not necessary. And but now we are seeing a lot of things which were not digital can be digitized. Something which I used to do by going in a physical manner can be done in a digital manner to some extent, if not fully. But there are still some activities which will have to be done in a physical manner, which may not be possible to digitize. So I will just take you through some of those applications or some of the areas and some tools that we use to carry out those work. So essentially for the collaboration, team collaboration, we use multiple tools like Microsoft Teams, one of the most prominent ones in enterprise segment, and Slack, which is predominantly used in a startup segment, and Confluence, which is used across all sorts of organizations. So we use these channels to collaborate. While having we want to have a chat, we want to have a call while sharing some notes or sharing my slide and jointly working on the slide. And also to store the files for a future use. Then comes the other set of tools on the video conferencing, like the one Zoom that we are using, or a WebEx or a Skype, which are predominantly used for a conferencing, just for the purpose of making calls. Then comes the other set of tools which are predominantly used for managing a project or a task, where like Monday.com or a Jira or a Trello or an Asana, which helps you keep a track of all those activities, all those touch points which you come across in a project, apart from probably storing, helping you code directly. These tools bring in all sorts of features along with it. Time management. We need to have we need to be aware of we need to have a good time management tool, a calendar functionality to ensure that we keep track of our time. It's easy to get lost in the work, but we need to be have a sensitivity towards those deadlines, be aware of it and to follow it. Then comes the CRM or the customer support tools, where which are used by organizations to track the prospects from the prospect stage to a customer to a long-term customer stage, which are used multiple functionalities they bring in terms of tracking details of Prashant as a prospect customer to getting up a meeting to get him converted into a customer and so on. Then comes the document sharing, multiple tools there, also multiple formats of documentation. Many of majority of them comes with the functionalities of saving in the cloud or saving in an as service model and then sharing it across. Similarly, file sharing alone is required. Again, but how do you do it? When we do it, is it secure? Is it requiring any sort of an approval? So there are a various set of tools which come into play there. Security, the approval, the validation, which ensures that the documents, the digital documents, or any digital artifact are shared, are the valid files, or are shared with a very secure manner, and it's not available for anybody to randomly pick up in the cyberspace. just having a look at, we looked at some 5-6 areas of tools or applications so far. But one critical thing to remember is these all perform some these all replace or help you carry out digitally one or the other task which used to get function which used to happen in a physical manner. So earlier I reach office at 10 o'clock, and 10:30 I have a stand-up meeting along with 10 of my colleagues for the current sprint. But nowadays, I just at 10:30, my calendar reminds me of the 10:25. My calendar reminds me of my meeting, daily stand-up meeting, and then I just log on to the meeting at 10:30. And then I share the document, I share the files, I file itself, or else share the screen and continue the discussion. So the key part here is the integration, how they are integrated, and what is that tool or the technology used to integrate. John will take you forward from here.
Thanks, Prashant. So Prashant looked at the different types of activities and the tools that help you to perform those. And while they all perform well individually, people don't spend their life on just one tool, they spend it on several. Also, what Prashant outlined was that there are some tools that integrate well with others. So it's possible to kick off a Zoom call from Slack. It's possible to set up a video conference on Zoom and have that integrate with Google Calendar to send out invitations. This happens because there are many of these tools publish APIs that enable other applications to consume that service and to set that up. But then there are other times when it's not just one tool working with another tool that's important, but a workflow from that involves several of these tools, an action that an event that triggers an action required in another application. And in those circumstances, people really want to be able to string together several of these applications. And this is, for those sorts of things, there are two main ways of doing that. One is through integration with APIs that are going to create these complicated workflows, these multi-step workflows, or robotic process automation. Now, I want to focus a little bit on the API story because robotic process automation has its strengths with legacy applications, but where you have more modern applications that have published APIs, using an integration platform as a service is a low code or no code way of connecting there. So there are a number of technology vendors that provide these tools that will enable you to do that. Zapier is a relatively simple one. It's good for simple types of workflows. Other ones are more complicated, but what they typically do is provide a drag and drop ability to connect an event from one application into an action in another. And each of those tools has connectors into the APIs of the different applications that it supports. What I'll show now is the next step, which is connecting between them. So I mentioned that APIs are really what provides the connectivity between these modern applications. And well, the initial phase, we talked about how people engage with customers and work within teams using these different tools, I think it's useful to look at this from the perspective of, if you have a product or service that your company provides, how do you make sure that you can be linked into these types of workflows? It's important now that when customers put together and companies put together fairly complex solutions from these building blocks, that if you're a company now, it doesn't really matter which industry you're in, you should be thinking about how can I make it possible for other people, for other companies to use my service as a building block. Publishing APIs enables other firms to sort of do the work to help bring you customers that you may not otherwise have. So I wanted to look at the design approaches of several of these, and there's some really good examples of leading APIs from the likes of Zoom and Slack in particular. And so what I will do is I'll hop out of the slideshow for the moment, and I'll just look at some of the characteristics of these. So we're looking at the Slack API. They have very good documentation around how their APIs are laid out, how you authenticate with them, and then how you call their APIs. So this particular guide here shows what the interface looks like for querying information from and making changes in a Slack workspace. So you can use many of the functions within the Slack application are exposed through APIs. It gives you an indication of the style of APIs that these are, and the query parameters that you need to send. You can start to see that the documentation around the parameters that you need to pass are fairly clear, and then you can use tools like Postman to run a test against the APIs to make sure that you understand what you can extract from them. It tells you about the how you evaluate your responses and what it passes back. The method of authentication uses OAuth 2.0, has these functions. So this is quite useful to understand what Slack provides in terms of the APIs that it exposes, so that you can integrate your own application with Slack, but also as a guide to how you would design your own APIs. With Zoom, the Zoom API also has very clear documentation. Instead of working with a workspace as Slack does, you're really talking about an account that you hold, that you're going to initiate meetings. So you can request information from Zoom about meetings that have been scheduled, the dashboard, the users, and but it shows you the security and authentication that's required in order to access this information. A bit about this authorization process, and then the types of listing accounts. So you can do basic list of the accounts that are underneath a master account, particularly useful as a company. You can see what sort of domains may be associated with these accounts, the settings, who's the account. You can change the account owner through this. So Zoom is, even though its primary purpose is simply video conferencing, they realize that the linkages that people may want to have with the Zoom app include understanding account information, understanding who the owners of accounts are, and then also understanding what's happening in the chats, in conversations. They're all related around this. So the reason that Slack is able to initiate a Zoom call is because it's able to tap into this API. If we move on from Zoom, we can look at, say, Zendesk, which is a CRM program. But as with other tools, you in a complex corporate environment, you've got a range of different tools that are much better when they're able to link systems of record like Zendesk with other tools. They have a marketplace where they're able to, companies that have built functionality on top of Zendesk can sell these through their marketplace. Quite an extensive set of applications in this marketplace, all able to add functionality because of their use of the Zendesk APIs. I think ServiceNow also has a pretty strong integration hub. And
in New York, we've done a ton to help our developer community be able to build reusable components. We need the power of code when we want it, but also the ability to automate systems quickly without having to write a lot of code. So in New York, we added some nice features to be able to automate any service endpoint. In this case, I'm going to show you how to automate that fermentation device. So here we can now automate any system with an OpenAPI specification. In this case, I've already imported the OpenAPI spec, but you can download them on the fly. Once I pick the OpenAPI, I'm going to pick the operation that I want to call. Now, some magic just happened here. So I'm going to come over here and zoom in. You can see that in my inputs, I have a complex object that was generated for me based on the OpenAPI, which is basically giving me the temperature and the VAT ID. Now, also in that API, it tells me that I need to be sending a JSON payload. So when I drop that complex object, actually it auto-generated this for me in the request body, it's going to build that JSON payload for me. That's it. I'm done. I built my automation.
Wanted to ask a quick question of the audience. What is your top priority for remote working? Is it enabling and scaling customer service? Is it managing and collaborating within distributed teams? Is it increasing the range of systems that staff can access, or is it digitizing business processes, or is it more into the remote monitoring and control aspects? Okay, well, it looks like everybody's most concerned with managing and collaborating with distributed teams. I guess that's not surprising in the current environment because a lot of people have suddenly become remote workers. There may have been some people working remotely before on a casual basis, but I think this is certainly top of mind now. What we tried to convey with this presentation is that with so many people remote working now, it requires a reevaluation of how people interact. If you can't get people physically into a meeting room to put things on a whiteboard, how can you enable the collaboration among team members with digital tools? And then although individual tools may be powerful in themselves in a standalone basis, when you are able to stitch together a more complicated workflow from those different tools, then you can achieve even more, and APIs are a key enabler of that. As you look at your tool set, it's useful to look at which tools fit with which other tools and how well they do that, and how that suits the culture of your company and the way you currently work or would like to work. So I guess that concludes our presentation. Prasad, did you have any closing comments you'd like to make?
No, John, I'm good there. Yeah.
Okay.
I hope it was useful to you. You got a learning and experience, something to take it back to work and integrate into your work or working style.
Okay. And what we intend to do is to run meetups like this. Certainly in the current environment, this will be online, but we intend to run meetups that focus on APIs from the standpoint of designing APIs, publishing, consuming APIs, and making the best, getting the best performance from APIs. We plan on running an event every 1 or 2 months, and we're certainly keen to hear your suggestions or requests on topics that are relevant to what you are doing. So please feel free to send us feedback. Connect with me and with Prasad on LinkedIn, and you can send us a message also through the Meetup app. So please, we're very keen to continue setting up these meetups, and we have a range of speakers and companies who are interested in sharing their expertise. Thanks very much.